This page is a glossary of architecture. Aisle subsidiary space alongside the body of a building, separated from it by columns, piers, or posts. Apron 1. Raised panel below a window or wall monument or tablet. 2. Open portion of a marine terminal immediately adjacent to a vessel berth, used in the direct transfer of cargo between the vessel and the terminal. 3. Concrete slab immediately outside a vehicular door or passageway used to limit the wear on asphalt paving due to repetitive turning movements. Apse vaulted semicircular or polygonal end of a chancel or chapel. Arcade passage or walkway covered over by a succession of arches or vaults supported by columns. Blind arcade or arcading. The same applied to the wall surface. Arch, a curved structure capable of spanning a space while supporting significant weight. Architrave, formalized lintel, the lowest member of the classical entablature, also the molded frame of a door or window. Arras, sharp edge where two surfaces meet at an angle. Arrow slit, a thin vertical aperture in a fortification through which an archer can launch arrows. Articulation. Articulation is the manner or method of jointing parts such that each part is clear and distinct in relation to the others, even though joined. Ashlar masonry of large blocks cut with even faces and square edges. Atlas, a support sculpted in the form of a man, which may take the place of a column, a pier or a pilaster. Atrium, in a court of a Roman or C20 house, in a multi-story building, a top-light-covered court rising through all stories. Attic, small top story within a roof, the story above the main entablature of a classical facade. Bahut, a small parapet or attic wall bearing the weight of the roof of a cathedral or church. Balconade, a false balcony, or railing at the outer plane of a window. Ball flower, an architectural ornament in the form of a ball inserted in the cup of a flower, which came into use in the latter part of the 13th, and was in great vogue in the early part of the 14th century. Baluster, a small molded shaft, square or circular, in stone or wood, sometimes metal, supporting the coping of a parapet or the handrail of a staircase, a series of balusters supporting a handrail or coping. Bargeboard, a board fastened to the projecting gables of a roof. Barrel vault, an architectural element formed by the extrusion of a single curve along a given distance. Bartizan, an overhanging, wall-mounted turret projecting from the walls of medieval fortifications. Basement, lowest, subordinate story of building, often either entirely or partially below ground level, the lowest part of classical elevation. Below the piano nobile. Basilica, originally a Roman, large roofed hall erected for transacting business and disposing of legal matters. Later the term came to describe an aisled building with a clearer story. Medieval cathedral plans were a development of the basilica plan type. Batter, upwardly receding slope of a wall or column. Battlement, a parapet, in which rectangular gaps or indentations occur at intervals to allow for the discharge of arrows or other missiles. Bays, internal compartments of a building, each divided from the other by subtle means such as the boundaries implied by divisions marked in the side, walls or the ceiling. Also external divisions of a building by fenestration. Bay window, window of one or more stories projecting from the face of a building. Canted, with a straight front and angled sides. Bow window, curved. Oriel, rests on corbels or brackets and starts above ground level. Also the bay window at the descent of a medieval great hall. Belfry, chamber or stage in a tower where bells are hung. The term is also used to describe the manner in which bricks are laid in a wall so that they interlock. Boss 1. Roughly cut stone set in place for later carving. 2. An ornamental projection, a carved keystone of a ribbed vault at the intersection of the ogives. Bossage, uncut stone that is laid in place in a building, projecting outward from the building, to later be carved into decorative moldings, capitals, arms, etc. Bossages are also rustic work, consisting of stones which seem to advance beyond the surface of the building, by reason of indentures. or channels left in the joinings, used chiefly in the corners of buildings, and called rustic quoins. The cavity or indenture may be round, square, chamfered, beveled, diamond-shaped, or enclosed with a cavator or listel. Bond brickwork with overlapping bricks. Types of bond include stretcher, English, header, Flemish, garden wall, herringbone, basket, American, and Chinese. Button type of support. An arc-buttant, or flying buttress, serves to sustain a vault, and is self-sustained by some strong wall or massive work. A pillar buttant is a large chain or jamb of stone, made to support a wall, terrace, or vault. The word is French, and comes from the verb bouter, to butt, or abut. Bracket weight-bearing member made of wood, stone, or metal that overhangs a wall. Bressumer, large, horizontal beam supporting the wall above, especially in a jetty building. Brise soleil projecting fins or canopies which shade windows from direct sunlight. Bullseye window, small oval window, set horizontally. Bulwark, barricade of beams and soil used in 15th and 16th century fortifications designed to mount artillery. On board ships, the term refers to the woodwork running round the ship above the level of the deck. Figuratively, it means anything serving as a defense. Dutch loanword, bulwark, buttress, vertical member projecting from a wall to stabilize it or to resist the lateral thrust of an arch, roof, or vault. A flying buttress transmits the thrust to a heavy abutment by means of an arch or half-arch. C. Cancellous barriers, which correspond to the modern balustrade or railing, especially the screen dividing the body of a church from the part occupied by the ministers, hence chancel. The Romans employed cancelli to partition off portions of the courts of law. Cantilever, an unsupported overhang acting as a lever, like a flagpole sticking out of the side of a wall. Capital, the topmost member of a column. Casement, window, window hung vertically, hinged one side, so that it swings inward or outward. Corliculus, or corlica, whole stalks with two leaves from which rise the helices or spiral scrolls of the Corinthian capital to support the abacus. Cella, the inner chamber of a temple in classical architecture. Chalcidicum, in Roman architecture, the vestibule or portico of a public building opening onto the forum, as in the Basilica of Eumachia at Pompeii, and the Basilica of Constantine at Rome, where it was placed at one end. C. Lacuna. Chandrashala, the circular or horseshoe arch that decorates many Indian cave temples and shrines. Chimera. Chimera, as an architectural feature, means a fantastic, mythical or grotesque figure used for decorative purposes. Chimney, a structure which provides ventilation. Cresmographan, chamber between the pronaos and the cella in Greek temples where oracles were delivered. Cincture, ring, list, or fillet at the top and bottom of a column, which divides the shaft from the capital and base. Cinquecento style, which became prevalent in Italy in the century following 1500, now usually called 16th century work. It was the result of the revival of classic architecture known as Renaissance, but the change had commenced already a century earlier, in the works of Ghiberti and Donatello in sculpture, and of Brunelleschi and Alberti in architecture. Cipis, a low, round or rectangular pedestal set up by the Romans for military purposes such as a milestone or a boundary post. The inscriptions on some cippi in the British Museum show that they were occasionally used as funeral memorials. Circulation describes the flow of people throughout a building. Clitheral, term applied to a covered Greek temple, in contradistinction to hypaethral, which designates one that is uncovered. The roof of a clitheral temple completely covers it. Coffer, a coffer, in architecture, is a sunken panel in the shape of a square, rectangle, or octagon that serves as a decorative device, usually in a ceiling or vault, also called caissons, or lacuna. Calaran, the little frieze of the capital of the Tuscan and Doric column placed between the astragal and the annulets. It was called hypotrachelium by Vitruvius. Column A, structural element that transmits, through compression, the weight of the structure above to other structural elements below. Compluvium, Latin term for the open space left in the roof of the atrium of a Roman house for lighting it and the rooms round, coping the capping or covering of a wall. Corbel, a structural piece of stone, wood or metal jutting from a wall to carry a superincumbent weight. Cornice, upper section of an entablature, a projecting shelf along the top of a wall often supported by brackets or corbels. Cross spring, a block from which the diagonal ribs of a vault spring or start. The top of the springer is known as the skewback. Cryptoporticus, concealed or covered passage, generally underground, though lighted and ventilated from the open air. One of the best-known examples is the Cryptoporticus under the palaces of the Caesars in Rome. In Hadrian's villa in Rome they formed the principal private intercommunication between the several buildings. Cuneus, a wedge-shaped division of the Roman theatre separated by the scalae or stairways. This shape also occurred in medieval architecture. Cupola, a small, most often dome-like, structure on top of a building. Diastyle, term used to designate an intercolumniation of 3 or 4 diameters. Diaulos, peristyle round the great court of the Palaestra, described by Vitruvius, which measured 2 stadia in length. On the south side this peristyle had 2 rows of columns, so that in a stormy weather the rain might not be driven into the inner part. The word was also used in ancient Greece for a foot race of twice the usual length. Diazoma, a horizontal aisle in an ancient Greek theatre that separates the lower and upper tiers of semicircular seating and intersects with the vertical aisles. Dhikr, Islamic architectural term for the tribune raised upon columns, from which the Quran is recited and the prayers intoned by the imam of the mosque. Dipteral temples, which have a double range of columns in the peristyle, as in the Temple of Diana at Ephesus. Distyle, having 2 columns, an architectural term for a portico having 2 columns between 2 anter. Dodecastyle temple, where the portico has 12 columns in front, as in the portico added to the Temple of Demeter at Eleusis, designed by Philo, the architect of the arsenal at the Piraeus. Doric order, one of the 3 orders or organizational systems of ancient Greek or classical architecture characterized by columns which stood on the flat pavement of a temple without a base. Their vertical shafts fluted with parallel concave grooves topped by a smooth capital that flared from the column to meet a square abacus at the intersection with the horizontal beam that they carried. Dormer, a structural element of a building that protrudes from the plane of a sloping roof surface. Dormers are used, either in original construction or as later additions, to create usable space in the roof of a building by adding headroom and usually also by enabling addition of windows. Dosseret, or impost block, cubical block of stone above the capitals in a Byzantine church, used to carry the arches and vault, the springing of which had a superficial area greatly in excess of the column which carried them. Dromos, entrance, passage or avenue leading to a building, tomb or passageway. Those leading to beehive tombs are enclosed between stone walls and sometimes infilled between successive uses of the tomb. In ancient Egypt the dromos was a straight, paved avenue flanked by sphinxes. Entablature, a superstructure of moldings and bands which lie horizontally above columns, resting on their capitals. Ephebium, large hall in the ancient palaestra furnished with seats, the length of which should be a third larger than the width. It served for the exercises of youths of from 16 to 18 years of age. Epinaus, open vestibule behind the nave. The term is not found in any classic author, but is a modern coinage, originating in Germany, to differentiate the feature from the opisthedomos, which in the Parthenon was an enclosed chamber. Estrade, French term for a raised platform or dais. In the Levant, the estrade of a divan is called a sofa, from which comes our word, sofa. U-style intercolumniation defined by Vitruvius as being of the best proportion, i.e., 2¼ diameters. F. Fanlight window, semicircular or semi-elliptical in shape, with glazing bars or tracery sets radiating out like an open fan. Feretory enclosure or chapel within which the ferretor's shrine, or tomb, was placed. Flushwork, the decorative combination on the same flat plane of flint and ashlar stone. It is characteristic of medieval buildings, most of the survivors' churches, in several areas of southern England, but especially East Anglia. If the stone projects from a flat flint wall, the term is proud work, as the stone stands proud rather than being flush with the wall. Flying buttress, a specific type of buttress usually found on a religious building such as a cathedral. Flying rib, an exposed structural beam over the uppermost part of a building which is not otherwise connected to the building at its highest point. A feature of H-frame constructed concrete buildings and some modern skyscrapers. Footstool, literally translation of pedestal, the lower part of a pier in architecture. Former, a French term for the wall rib carrying the web or filling in of a vault. Gable, a triangular portion of an end wall between the edges of a sloping roof. Gablets, triangular terminations to buttresses, much in use in the early English and decorated periods, after which the buttress is generally terminated in pinnacles. The early English gablets are generally plain, and very sharp in pitch. In the decorated period they are often enriched with panelling and crockets. They are sometimes finished with small crosses, but more often with finials. Gadrooning, carved or curved molding used in architecture and interior design as decorative motif, often consisting of flutes which are inverted and curved. Popular during the Italian Renaissance. Gambrel, a symmetrical two-sided roof with two slopes on each side. Galleting, the process in which the gallets or small splinters of stone are inserted in the joints of coarse masonry to protect the mortar joints. They are stuck in while the mortar is wet. Gargoyle, a carved stone grotesque with a spout designed to convey water from a roof. Gauged brickwork, brickwork constructed of soft bricks rubbed to achieve a fine smooth finish with narrow joints between courses. Gazebo, a freestanding pavilion structure often found in parks, gardens and public areas. Geison, the part of the entablature that projects outward from the top of the frieze in the Doric order and from the top of the frieze course of the Ionic and Corinthian orders. It forms the outer edge of the roof on the sides of a structure with a sloped roof. Hip roof, a type of roof where all sides slope downwards to the walls. Possibly from an older term, hephanon, a structural section connecting the main portion of a building with its projecting dependencies, or wings. Imperial roof decoration, a row of small figures along the unions of the roofs of Chinese official buildings. Jagati, a raised surface, platform or terrace upon which an Indian temple is placed. Jettying, a building technique used in medieval timber frame buildings in which an upper floor projects beyond the dimensions of the floor below. Keystone, the architectural piece at the crown of a vault or arch and marks its apex, locking the other pieces into position. Lacuna, Latin name in architecture for panelled or coffered ceiling, soffit, or vault adorned with a pattern of recessed panels. Latticework, an ornamental, lattice framework consisting of a criss-crossed pattern. Lintel, a horizontal block that spans the space between two supports. Loculus, an architectural niche that houses a body, as in a catacomb, hypogeum, mausoleum or other place of entombment. Loggia, a gallery formed by a colonnade opened on one or more sides. The space is often located on an upper floor of a building overlooking an open court or garden. Lunette, a half-moon-shaped space, either masonry or void. Maksura, in Islamic architecture, the sanctuary or praying chamber in a mosque, sometimes enclosed with a screen of latticework, occasionally a similar enclosure round a tomb. Mandapa, in Indian architecture, a pillared outdoor hall or pavilion for public rituals. Mansard roof, a curb-hip roof in which each face has two slopes, the lower one steeper than the upper, from the French mansarde, after the accomplished 17th-century French architect noted for using this style, François Mansart. 1666. Marriage stone. A stone lintel, usually carved, with a marriage date. Mascarone. A mascarone ornament is a face, usually human, sometimes frightening or chimeric, used as a decorative element. Mihrab. Mihrab in Islamic architecture, a semicircular niche in the wall of a mosque that indicates the direction of prayer. Modillion. Enriched block or horizontal bracket, generally found under the cornice and above the bedmold of the Corinthian entablature. It is probably so called because of its arrangement in regulated distances. Monotriglyph. Interval of the intercolumniation of the Doric column, which is observed by the intervention of one triglyph only between the triglyphs which come over the axes of the columns. This is the usual arrangement, but in the Propylaea at Athens there are two triglyphs over the central intercolumniation, in order to give increased width to the roadway, up which chariots and beasts of sacrifice ascended. Molding. Decorative finishing strip. Mullion. Vertical bar of wood, metal or stone which divides a window into two or more parts. Muqarnas. Type of decorative corbel used in Islamic architecture that in some circumstances resembles stalactites. Mutual. Rectangular block under the soffit of the cornice of the Greek Doric temple, which is studded with gutter. It is supposed to represent the piece of timber through which the wooden pegs were driven in order to hold the rafter in position, and it follows the sloping rake of the roof. In the Roman Doric order the mutual was horizontal, with sometimes a crowning fillet, so that it virtually fulfilled the purpose of the modillion in the Corinthian cornice. Narthex. An enclosed passage between the main entrance and the nave of a church. Nave. The main body of a church. It provides the central approach to the high altar. Niche. In classical architecture is an exedra or an apse that has been reduced in size, retaining the half-dome heading usual for an apse.